Everything changes in episode 5, not because of explosions or big twists, but because something inside Tommy finally cracks. This episode doesn't rush anything. Instead, it tightens the pressure slowly, scene by scene, until you realize there's no space left for him to breathe. Landman Season 2 has been quietly building toward this moment, and Episode 5 feels like the point where holding it together is no longer an option. Tommy has been surviving on control, routine, and responsibility for so long that when even one piece starts slipping, the entire structure threatens to collapse. And what makes this episode hit so hard is that the breaking point doesn't come from strangers or enemies, but from the people and memories he's been carrying his whole life. Episode 5 opens with the weight of everything that came before still hanging in the air. The grief from the funeral hasn't faded. The tension from unfinished conversations hasn't settled. And Tommy is moving through it all like a man who refuses to stop, because stopping would mean feeling everything at once. What's striking here is how quiet his struggle is. He's still showing up, still handling business, still trying to be useful. But there's a distance in him now, like he's slightly disconnected from the world around him. And that distance becomes even more obvious when Cammy Miller enters the picture again. At this point, it almost feels undeniable that Cammy has become the emotional engine of this season. She isn't loud about it. She doesn't demand attention. But every decision she makes pushes the story forward, and Episode 5 proves just how much she's carrying on her own. After Episode 4 drained everyone emotionally, Cammy responds in the opposite way you'd expect. Instead of slowing down, she speeds up. Instead of processing grief, she buries it under action. She refuses to sit still long enough to feel the damage, because if she does, everything she's holding together might fall apart. And this is where the episode starts tightening the screws. Cammy isn't chasing power or control, she's chasing survival. The offshore investment she needs isn't just money, it's the future of the company, the last thread connecting her to her late husband's legacy, and the proof that everything she sacrificed wasn't for nothing. But when every reasonable option collapses, the story forces her into a corner. Galeno becomes the last door left open. And the terrifying part isn't that he agrees, it's that he agrees with conditions. He wants Tommy involved, personally involved, not because Tommy is the best man for the job, but because Galeno wants him close again, tied to him, entangled. Episode 5 makes it painfully clear that Galeno doesn't just deal in business, he deals in leverage, and bringing Tommy back into his orbit is part of a much bigger game. Tommy sees the danger immediately. He doesn't hesitate. He tells Cammy straight to her face that Galeno is dangerous. And for once, there's no exaggeration in his voice. It's not fear, it's experience. He knows exactly what kind of man Galeno is and what it costs to stay connected to him. But Cammy doesn't have the luxury of choosing safety anymore. Her response says everything about where she's at mentally. She would rather hug the snake than drown in open water. And that line defines her entire mindset in this episode. She isn't naive, she isn't blind, she's desperate. And desperation makes people accept risks they swore they never would. When she admits that if this deal fails, everything she's been holding together could collapse in front of her, you can hear how raw she still is beneath the composure. The company, the project, her husband's memory. For her, Galeno isn't a choice. He's the last option in a world that has stopped giving her grace. And this is where Tommy's internal conflict becomes impossible to ignore. No matter how hard Cammy tries to keep things strictly professional, Tommy can't separate business from personal loss. That's just not who he is. Every warning he gives her is layered with concern, guilt, and the unspoken fear that if this goes wrong, he'll blame himself forever. When the meeting with Galeno finally happens, the tension doesn't explode right away. It simmers. The conversation stays polite just long enough to feel uncomfortable. Then the topic of Tommy's son surfaces, and everything shifts. The air changes, voices sharpen, and suddenly, what started as a business discussion becomes something far more dangerous. The escalation is fast, almost frighteningly so, and when Tommy's hand moves toward his gun, it doesn't feel shocking. It feels inevitable. This is a man stretched thin, grieving multiple losses at once, furious at the manipulation in front of him, and desperate to protect the few things he still has left. Episode 5 doesn't paint him as reckless, it shows him as exhausted, and exhaustion can be just as dangerous. What makes this moment land is the context the show has caref. Everything finally snaps in this episode, not with a loud explosion, not with a single dramatic moment, but with years of pressure collapsing all at once. Episode 5 of Landman Season 2 doesn't rush Tommy toward his breaking point. It walks him there slowly, painfully, and by the time he realizes what's happening, it's already too late to turn back. Section 1. Landman. Season 2 continues to prove that this story isn't just about oil, money, or power. It's about people who are carrying too much and pretending they're fine. Episode 5 places Tommy right in the center of that weight. From the very beginning, you can feel that something about him is different. He's still moving, still solving problems, still showing up when he's needed, but there's a hollowness to him now. The kind that comes from grief you never had time to sit with. The kind that builds quietly while everyone around you keeps demanding more. And that's exactly what this episode explores. Tommy isn't falling apart because of one mistake or one bad decision. He's reaching his breaking point because everything in his life is pulling at him from different directions, and none of it is letting him breathe. Cammy remains one of the most fascinating parts of this episode. Just like before, she's operating at full speed, refusing to slow down or process what she's feeling. After the emotional wreckage of the previous episode, you'd expect her to pause, to hesitate, to question her next move. Instead, she doubles down. She becomes sharper, more focused, almost detached, and in many ways, she feels like the true engine driving the story forward. The desperation behind her choices is impossible to ignore. She isn't chasing power for the sake of it. She's chasing survival. The offshore project isn't just business to her. It's her husband's legacy. It's proof that everything she's held together hasn't been for nothing. And when every safe option disappears, she's left with the one choice she knows is dangerous but unavoidable. That choice, of course, leads straight back to Galino. And the moment his name re-enters the picture, the tension in the episode tightens. Galino doesn't need to raise his voice or make threats. His presence alone changes the temperature of every scene he's in. He represents the kind of danger that doesn't rush you. It waits. When he agrees to help Cammy, it's not generosity, it's strategy. His condition makes that clear. Tommy must be involved, not because Tommy is the best man for the job, but because Galino wants him close again. He wants him tangled in the same web he barely escaped before, and Tommy knows it. You can see it in the way he reacts, in the way he tries, one last time, to pull Cammy back from the edge. Tommy's warning to her isn't dramatic. He doesn't beg. He doesn't threaten. He just tells the truth. Galino is dangerous, simple, direct, honest. And that's what makes Cammy's response hurt even more. She understands the risk. She sees the snake clearly. But from where she's standing, drowning feels worse. Her fear isn't about money alone. It's about losing everything she's fought to protect. In that moment, the show does something powerful. It doesn't ask us to choose sides. It lets us sit in the discomfort of knowing that both of them are right, and both of them are trapped. Cammy's rawness cuts through the scene. She isn't being reckless. She's being cornered by a world that stopped offering her grace a long time ago. For Tommy, stepping back into Galino's world is like reopening a wound that never healed properly. Every interaction pulls him further away from the careful balance he's been trying to maintain. During their meeting, the tension doesn't rise slowly. It spikes. The conversation turns personal, and when the topic of his son comes up, something in Tommy shifts. This isn't business anymore. It's an attack. The moment his hand moves toward his gun isn't about violence. It's about instinct, protection, rage, grief, all colliding at once. Tommy is exhausted. He's grieving his mother. He's trying to protect his family. He's carrying the weight of other people's futures. And now he's being dragged back into a world he knows will cost him more than he can afford to give. What makes this episode so effective is that it never portrays Tommy as weak, but it also never pretends he's unbreakable. He's hanging by a thread, and the show lets us feel every fray in that thread. From the moment he walked into his mother's funeral, it was clear that something inside him had already started to unravel. Episode 5 doesn't just acknowledge that pain, it digs into it. It forces him back into spaces filled with memories he spent his entire life avoiding. And being surrounded by those memories isn't healing. It's suffocating. Every room presses on him, reminding him of a childhood shaped by silence, anger, and loss. This is where the episode truly earns its emotional weight. The cracks in Tommy's past aren't presented as the emotional center of this episode doesn't come from the deal or the danger surrounding Galeno. It comes from the past finally catching up to Tommy in a way he can no longer outrun. Episode 5 slows down just enough to let us sit with the weight of his history, and it's uncomfortable in the best possible way. Being back in his childhood home isn't nostalgic. It's haunting. Every corner carries a memory he never asked to keep. The show has hinted before that Tommy's upbringing wasn't gentle, but this is the first time it lets us feel how deeply those early years shaped the man he became. There's a sense that he learned very young how to survive by staying quiet, by handling things on his own, by never expecting comfort from anyone else. And that survival instinct, the same one that made him strong, is now part of what's breaking him. The conversation that truly opens the door comes from an unexpectedly small moment. Ariana asks a simple, honest question about Tommy's mother. Why hasn't anyone shared a happy memory? It's not an accusation, it's curiosity. But that question lands like a blow. You can see it in Tommy's face. Something shifts, something gives, and suddenly the silence he's carried his entire life cracks open. What follows isn't dramatic or loud. It's quiet, measured, and devastating. Tommy tells the story of the bathtub, of being a